The alarm tore through the module at 3 in the morning, and I was on my feet before my eyes even opened. Red light spun across the walls. A hiss came from somewhere behind the wall panels, sharp and wrong, like air being pulled out of a bottle too fast. I grabbed the edge of my bunk to steady myself as the floor gave a small shudder under my bare feet. A breach warning, not a drill. The station computer never used that particular tone for a drill. My roommate was already moving. Cale stood near the far wall, tall and thin, silver eyes wide in the dark, 4 long fingers pressed against a control panel that glowed faintly blue under his touch. He did not look at me. He rarely looked at me first thing, as if eye contact before sunrise was some kind of small offense. Section 14, he said, voice tight. The outer seal is failing. We have maybe 6 minutes before it opens into the corridor. 6 minutes. That was nothing. That was barely enough time to think, let alone fix a hull seal that had probably been failing quietly for days before anyone noticed. I pulled on my boots without lacing them and grabbed the emergency kit from under my bunk. My hands were steady, which surprised me a little, because my heart was slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. Where's the manual override? I asked. Cale turned to me then, just for a second, and something crossed his face that I still cannot fully name. Maybe surprise, maybe something closer to reluctant respect. His people did not usually ask for help. They especially did not expect it from someone like me. There is no manual override, he said. Section 14 was sealed with old generation locks. Once the pressure drops below a certain point, the door will not hold, no matter what we do. Then we don't let the pressure drop, I said, already moving toward the corridor. We reroute the emergency pumps from Section 9. Buy ourselves time. He followed me, and for once he did not question it. We ran together through the narrow service corridor, past humming pipes and blinking status lights, past 2 other residents who had come out of their pods in confusion, unsure whether to run toward the noise or away from it. I did not have time to explain anything to them. I barely had time to explain it to myself. We reached the junction room where the pumps were housed, a tight space filled with humming machinery and the smell of hot metal. Cale went straight for the diagnostic terminal, his fingers flying across symbols I did not recognize. I went for the physical valve controls, the old kind, the kind built for hands like mine rather than sensors. Pump 3 is already at maximum, Cale said. If we push pump 4 to match it, we might stabilize Section 14 long enough for the automated repair drones to seal the crack properly. Might, I repeated, twisting the valve as hard as I could. It groaned, stuck, then finally gave way under my grip. Might is better than nothing, he said. The pump roared to life beside me, vibrating through the floor and up into my chest. On the small monitor above the terminal, a red line that had been dropping steadily began to slow. Then it stopped falling. Then, agonizingly slowly, it began to climb back up. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. We just stood there, listening to the pump work, watching numbers we barely understood tell us whether we were about to live through the night or not. It's holding, Cale finally said, and something in his shoulders loosened, just slightly, like a held breath finally released. We stayed in that junction room for almost 2 hours, making sure the pressure held steady, making sure the drones arrived to patch the crack properly, making sure the whole thing did not fall apart the moment we walked away. By the time the station computer finally gave the all clear, gray light was already creeping in through the small window at the end of the corridor. I do not think either of us had ever been that tired in our lives. We made our way back to our shared quarters in silence, the kind of silence that comes after fear has drained out of your body and left something heavier behind. My legs ached. My hands were raw from gripping metal too hard for too long. I collapsed onto the small couch in the main room because my own bunk felt impossibly far away, and I did not trust my legs to carry me that last stretch. I must have closed my eyes for only a second. When I opened them again, Cale was sitting on the far end of the same couch, his head tilted back against the wall, his silver eyes finally closed. He was asleep, beside me. I need to explain something about Cale's people, because if you do not understand it, you will not understand why this mattered. His species almost never sleeps near another being, not strangers, not friends, not even close family, from what little he had told me over the months we had shared this small space. Sleep, for them, is the one moment when every defense drops completely. No control, no awareness, nothing standing between them and whatever the world might do while they are unaware of it. To sleep near someone is either the deepest trust one of his kind can offer, or it is a mistake so severe it can end friendships, end alliances, sometimes end far more than that. There is no in-between. There is no accident that gets forgiven easily. And here he was, exhausted past the point of caring, breathing slowly, and evenly less than an arm's length away from me, completely unaware that he had just crossed a line his entire culture treated as sacred. I sat very still. Part of me understood, even then, half awake and aching, that I was looking at something most humans would never see. Part of me understood that whatever I did in the next few minutes would matter more than almost anything else I had done since arriving on this station. I could have woken him. That would have been the easy thing, the safe thing. Wake him up, pretend nothing happened, let him retreat to his sealed pod and never speak of it again. I could have recorded it. There were cameras in the room, small ones meant for security logs, and it would have taken nothing at all to save a clip, to show someone later, to use it as proof of something, leverage of some kind, a story to tell. I did neither. Instead, I reached over slowly and pulled the thin blanket from the back of the couch across both of us, careful not to shift the cushions too much, careful not to wake him. Then I stayed where I was, back straight against the armrest, eyes open, watching the door. I do not fully know why I did it. Maybe because I was too tired to move anyway. Maybe because some old, quiet part of me understood that a person who trusts you enough to fall asleep beside you, even by accident, deserves to wake up safe and undisturbed. Maybe I simply could not imagine doing anything else. So I sat there as the gray morning light slowly turned gold, keeping watch over someone who did not know he needed watching, in a room that suddenly felt very small and very important. Cale woke a little after 7. I felt him stir before I saw it, a small shift in weight, a change in his breathing. Then his eyes opened, and for one full second, he simply stared at the ceiling, confused, the way anyone does when they wake up somewhere unfamiliar. Then he realized where he was, and who he was next to. I watched the exact moment it hit him. His whole body went rigid, silver eyes wide, breath catching hard in his throat. He sat up so fast the blanket slid off his shoulders and pooled around his waist, and for a moment he just stared at me, and I stared back, and neither of us said anything. "I fell asleep," he said, voice barely above a whisper, like saying it quietly might undo it. "You did," I said. "You were exhausted. It happens." "Not to me," he said, and there was something raw in his voice, something close to fear. "Not ever, not like this." I did not know exactly what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. "Nothing happened. You slept. I stayed awake and made sure the door stayed locked and nobody came in. That's it. That's the whole story." He looked at me like I had said something in a language he did not fully understand, even though I knew he understood every word. His eyes moved to the small camera mounted near the ceiling, then back to me. "You didn't record it," he said. It was not quite a question. "Why would I?" I asked, honestly a little confused by the question itself. "You were tired. I was tired. We both nearly died in a junction room a few hours ago. Sleeping on a couch afterward doesn't seem like something worth making a big deal out of." For a long moment, Cale said nothing at all. He simply sat there, blanket pooled around him, staring at me like he was trying to work out some kind of equation that refused to balance. "Where I come from," he finally said, "what just happened only means one of two things. Either you are someone I trust with my life completely, without question, forever, or you are someone who will use what you saw against me for as long as you live. There is no middle version of this. There has never been a middle version of this." "Then I suppose you got lucky," I said, trying to keep my voice light, though my chest felt strangely tight, "because I'm not interested in either extreme. I just didn't want you waking up to an empty room and an unlocked door after the night we had." He looked down at his hands for a moment, 4 long fingers curling slowly against his knees. When he looked back up, something in his face had changed, something I had not seen in the months we had shared this small space. "You stayed awake," he said, "the whole time." "Most of it," I admitted. "Why?" I thought about lying, about making it sound simpler than it was, about brushing it off as nothing at all. But he deserved better than that, especially after everything the night had already asked of both of us. "Because you trusted me enough to fall asleep next to me, even if you didn't mean to," I said, "and I wasn't about to make you regret it." Cale did not say anything else for a long time. He stood up slowly, folded the blanket with careful, precise movements, and set it back on the couch. Then he walked to the small kitchen unit in the corner of our quarters and began preparing something, and I realized with a small jolt of surprise that he was making food for both of us. He had never done that before, not once, in all the months we had lived together. We ate in near silence that morning, but it was not the same tense, careful silence we usually shared over meals. This was something else, something quieter and warmer, like two people who had just walked through fire together and come out the other side still standing. I thought that would be the end of it, a private moment, understood only between the two of us, quietly folded away and never mentioned again outside these four walls. I was wrong. By that afternoon, I noticed people looking at me differently in the station's common hall. Not with the usual polite distance humans usually got from the other species aboard, that careful, guarded politeness reserved for beings still considered unpredictable and new to the wider galaxy. This was something else. Curious glances. A few nods I did not expect. One older being from a species I barely recognized paused near my table just long enough to say, in careful, halting words, that Kale's people rarely spoke of such things outside their own kind, and that when they did, it was never taken lightly. I asked Kale about it later that evening, once we were back in our quarters, once the strange weight of being watched had finally faded from my shoulders. I did not tell anyone what happened, he said quickly, almost defensively. I would never share something like that without your agreement. Then how do they know? He was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands again. That same careful, thoughtful stillness I was starting to recognize as his version of choosing words with great care. My people carry small markers, he finally said. Biological signals, present after a night of true, undefended sleep near another being. It is not something we can hide, even if we wanted to. Others of my kind can sense it instantly. It is impossible to fake and impossible to conceal. So they know you slept next to me, I said slowly, understanding beginning to settle over me. And they know I didn't do anything to hurt you while you were vulnerable. They know more than that, Kale said, and for the first time since I had known him, something like a smile touched the corner of his mouth. They know you had every opportunity to take advantage of it, every reason, by our understanding, to use it, to gain something from it, to hold it over me, and you chose instead to simply keep watch and let me sleep. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing at all. My people have shared this station with humans for almost 2 years now, Kale continued. Most of us still do not fully understand you. You are strong in ways that unsettle us. You move quickly, decide quickly. Act without the same caution we were raised to value above almost everything else. Many of my kind assumed that strength meant danger, that unpredictability meant you could not truly be trusted with something as fragile as an undefended sleep. And now? Now they have proof otherwise, he said simply. One human, given the perfect opportunity to exploit vulnerability, chose instead to protect it without being asked. Word travels quickly among my people when something like that happens. It is already reaching other stations, other outposts, other worlds eventually. I sat with that for a long moment, turning it over slowly. I had not done anything I considered remarkable. I had simply stayed awake and kept a door locked, because leaving someone unprotected after everything we had survived together felt unthinkable to me. It had not occurred to me, not even once, that it might mean something larger to anyone beyond the two of us. Over the following weeks, I noticed small shifts around the station that I could not fully explain at first. Other species began approaching human residents with a little less caution, a little more openness. A trade negotiation that had stalled for months suddenly moved forward again, and the alien representative involved mentioned, almost in passing, that recent events had shifted certain long-held opinions about human character. A young alien child, barely old enough to speak, once ran up to me in the common hall simply to stare at me with wide, curious eyes before her guardian gently pulled her away, murmuring something about the human who had kept watch. I never sought any of it out. I never explained the full story to anyone beyond Kale himself. But somehow, quietly and without any grand announcement, humanity's reputation among the other species on that station began to shift, one small conversation at a time. Kale and I never spoke about that night in great detail again, not because it was forgotten, but because it did not need repeating. Something had settled between us that did not require constant explanation. We shared meals more often after that. We spoke more freely, laughed more easily, moved through our shared quarters with a comfort that had not existed before. Months later, another emergency alarm went off, smaller this time, a minor system failure rather than a true crisis. I remember waking instantly, the way you do once your body has learned what real danger sounds like. I remember Kale already awake beside me on the couch where we had both fallen asleep after a long, ordinary evening of nothing more dramatic than shared conversation and quiet company. He looked at me in the dim emergency light, and there was no fear in his eyes this time, no shock, no scramble to explain or apologize. Just quiet trust, already settled, already understood. Ready? He asked. Always, I said. We moved together toward the sound of the alarm, the same way we had that first night, except this time there was no hesitation between us, no uncertainty about where we stood. Whatever waited for us down that corridor, We would face it exactly the way we had learned to face everything since that long night in the junction room and the quiet morning that followed it. Together, without question, without needing to be asked twice. And somewhere far beyond our small station, among species who had once viewed humanity with wary distance, a different kind of story was still quietly spreading, one small act of decency at a time.